When my husband Mark announced, between my agonizing contractions, that his boss's urgent meeting was more important than the birth of our child, I didn't scream. I just smiled. The moment the delivery room door clicked shut behind him, I sent a single text to my lawyer, authorizing the final step of a plan months in the making. Mark was probably already screaming with joy to his boss about the promotion he thought he'd secured, but he had no idea he'd just abandoned his boss's only biological grandchild to get it. You won't believe what name I put on the birth certificate. The beeping is the only thing that's real. A steady, electronic metronome counting out the seconds between waves of searing pain. Asterisk beep. 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 Asterisk, it's a lifeline in this sterile white ocean where I am drowning. Each contraction is a monstrous tide that pulls me under, stealing my breath, twisting my spine, and for a few infinite moments, I am nothing but a vessel for this primal, overwhelming force. Then it recedes, leaving me gasping on the shore of a starched hospital sheet, my body trembling with the aftershocks. The beeping remains. Constant. Indifferent. A reminder that my heart is still beating, even though it feels like it's being methodically torn from my chest. I risk a glance to my right. He's there. My husband, Mark. He sits in the uncomfortable-looking visitor's chair by the window, a dark silhouette against the deepening twilight outside. His face is bathed in the cold, blue-white glow of his phone. His thumb scrolls, a frantic, repetitive motion. His jaw is a hard line of tension, his brow furrowed in concentration. But his anxiety has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with the fact that our first child is fighting his way into the world in this very room. He's reading emails. I can tell by the angle of his head, the way his eyes dart back and forth. He is here, but he is not with me. We are occupying the same space, but existing in different universes. I remember when we first found out I was pregnant. It was a Tuesday morning in April. I'd laid the positive test on his pillow, my own heart a frantic bird in my ribs. He'd woken up, seen it, and a slow, genuine smile had spread across his face. He pulled me into his arms, burying his face in my hair. "We're going to be a family," he'd whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "A real family. I'm going to be the best dad. I'm going to give you to the world, Laura. I swear it." I believed him. I held on to that promise like a talisman. It was the reason I'd agreed to sell the small house I'd inherited from my first husband, David. The house David and I had picked out together, the one with the climbing roses he'd planted along the fence. "It's a fresh start, honey," Mark had reasoned, his voice smooth and persuasive. "That house is full of old memories. We need to build our own. And the money from the sale, it'll give us a cushion. It'll let me focus on my career without financial pressure. It's an investment in our future." So I sold it. I transferred the $287,451.19 from the sale into our joint account. I watched as it funded his new suits, the lease on a more impressive car, the country club membership he insisted was essential for networking. I packed up David's photos and his books, placing them carefully into storage, pieces of my past archived to make room for Mark's future. For our future. I told myself it was the right thing to do. I told myself that this was what love was, sacrifice and belief. Another contraction begins, a low thrum deep in my back that quickly builds into a crushing crescendo. I squeeze my eyes shut, my knuckles turning white as I grip the cold metal bedrail. I try to breathe, the way the nurse told me to. In for 4, out for 6. But the pain is a thief, stealing the air from my lungs. "Mark." The word is a ragged gasp, torn from my throat. "Mark. I think it's time." He looks up from his phone, his eyes taking a moment to focus, to travel the 10 feet of linoleum that separates his world from mine. There's a flicker of annoyance in his expression before he papers over it with a strained smile. "The doctor said it could still be hours, honey. You're doing great. Just breathe." He says it with the same detached encouragement one might offer a stranger running a marathon. He hasn't touched me in over an hour. Hasn't held my hand, or wiped the sweat from my forehead. He is a spectator at the event of his own child's birth. Just then, his phone buzzes. Not a text, but a call. The ringtone is different, a sharp, professional chime he reserves for one person. His boss. Mr. Harrison. He answers it before the first ring is complete, his entire posture shifting. He sits up straighter, his voice dropping an octave, becoming deferential, eager. Mr. Harrison, yes sir. Of course. A long pause fills the room, punctuated only by the relentless beeping of my heart monitor. I watch my husband's face. I see the conflict playing out in real time. The ambition warring with the responsibility. The hunger for success wrestling with the duty of a husband. I feel a cold, slick dread creep up my spine, a certainty so absolute it's more painful than the contraction that is, even now, beginning to build again. I know which side will win. I've seen it win 100 times before, in smaller, more subtle ways. The cancelled dinner dates, the postponed vacations, the conversations he wasn't really listening to because he was thinking about a quarterly report. This is just the grand finale. He hangs up the phone, placing it screen down on the small table beside him with a soft click. He takes a deep breath and stands, a mask of profound, theatrical regret settling over his features. It's a performance, and a poor one at that. Laura, he begins, and he can't even meet my eyes. He's looking at a spot on the wall just above my head. Laura, I have to go. The words hang in the air, so absurd, so monstrously unbelievable that for a second, I think I must have misheard him through the fog of pain. Go? I echo, my voice small. Go where? Mr. Harrison called an emergency meeting. The partners are all there. He's announcing the new vice president tonight. Laura, this is it. This is what we've been working for. We. The word is a slap in the face. We haven't been working for anything. He has been working. I have been facilitating. I have been the quiet, supportive infrastructure for his ambition. I managed the house, paid the bills from the account I had funded, and carried his child for 9 months, and now, at the final, critical moment, I am an inconvenience. No, I whisper, the denial a fragile thing. Tears begin to well, blurring the sight of his face. Mark, please. You can't. Not now. Don't leave me now. Please. The begging shames me, but I can't stop it. The primal fear of being alone, of facing this monumental, terrifying event by myself, overrides everything else. He's already shrugging on his jacket, the expensive wool one I bought him for his birthday. You're strong, Laura. You're the strongest person I know. He's using my own strength against me, turning it into an excuse. The nurses are right here. Dr. Evans is on her way. You're in the best possible hands. He walks towards the door, stopping to glance back. I'll be back before you know it. I'll be back as a VP. Think about it. We'll be celebrating. This is for our future. For the baby. He blows a kiss from the doorway, a flippant, careless gesture, and then he is gone. The click of the door latch is the loudest sound I have ever heard. It echoes in the sudden, crushing silence of the room. The silence he left behind is a physical weight, heavier and more suffocating than any contraction. For a long moment, I don't move. I just lie there, staring at the empty doorway, the beeping of the monitor the only proof that I am still alive. And then, a sob breaks free. It's not a scream of pain, but a low, guttural sound of pure, unadulterated heartbreak. The gaping wound in my soul is infinitely more painful than the one my body is enduring. I have been abandoned. On the battlefield of childbirth, my partner, my husband, has turned and fled, choosing a promotion, a title, a number on a paycheck, over me. Over his own son. A nurse, a kind woman named Chloe with warm eyes and gentle hands, bustles in. "How are we doing, sweetie? Let's check on you." She sees my face, the tear tracks on my cheeks, the empty chair. Her professional smile falters, replaced by a look of genuine concern. "Where's Dad?" "He had to go," I say, my voice flat, devoid of all emotion. "Work." Chloe's eyes flash with a kind of righteous female anger that is more comforting than any platitude could be. She doesn't say what she's thinking. She doesn't have to. Instead, she pulls the visitor's chair closer to the bed. "Okay, then," she says, her voice firm and kind. "Then I'm not leaving your side. Squeeze my hand as hard as you need to. We're going to do this together." And we do. For the next 3 hours, Chloe is my rock. She breathes with me. She counts for me. She tells me I am strong, and for the first time, it doesn't feel like an excuse. It feels like the truth. In the crucible of pain and effort, the heartbreak I felt begins to change. It cools and hardens. The molten grief begins to crystallize into something else. Something cold and sharp and clear. A decision. I think of the money I gave him, the life I enabled, the sacrifices I made in the name of a future he just proved was a lie. I think of the secret I have been carrying, a secret I was going to share with him tonight, a final, beautiful piece to complete the puzzle of our family. I was going to offer him the one thing he could never achieve on his own, a legacy. I was going to tell him the truth about this baby. But he made his choice. He chose a meeting. He chose a title. And in doing so, he chose his own fate. The love I had for him, the patient, forgiving, supportive love, withers and dies right there on the delivery table. In its place, something new takes root. A fierce, protective love for the child inside me, and a calm, quiet, ice-cold resolve. Then, after a final, monumental push that tears a scream from my lungs, the world goes quiet. The pain vanishes, replaced by an exhausted, trembling peace. And then, a new sound cuts through the room. A thin, reedy cry. "My son. He's here, Laura," the doctor says, her voice bright. "He's perfect." They lay him on my chest, a warm, wriggling weight wrapped in a soft blanket. He smells of vernix and miracles. I look down at his face, so tiny, so new, his eyes squeezed shut, his mouth working silently. And I am lost. A wave of love so powerful, so absolute, washes over me, cleansing the last of the pain and the bitterness. This is all that matters. Him. I stare at his perfect, tiny face, at the downy hair on his head. With a trembling finger, I gently uncurl his miniature fist. And there it is. On the delicate skin of his wrist, a small, star-shaped birthmark, a faint brown against his pale skin. A perfect, tiny star. Just like his father's. His real father's. Tears fill my eyes again, but this time, they are not for Mark. They are for David. They are for the love we lost, and for this impossible, miraculous echo of him that I now hold in my arms. "Hello, my love," I whisper, my voice thick. "I'm your mommy. I'm so glad you're finally here." An hour passes in a blissful haze. I feed him. I count his fingers and toes. I memorize the curve of his ear. I am in a bubble, a world that consists only of the two of us. Then the bubble bursts. The door to my room swings open, and Mark strides in, his face split by a triumphant, beaming grin. He's holding a small, sad-looking bouquet of carnations from the hospital gift shop, the cellophane crinkling loudly in the quiet room. He smells of expensive cologne and smug satisfaction. "I got it," he announces, his voice booming. "Vice President. Can you believe it? We're on top of the world, Laura." He leans in to kiss me, his eyes fixed on the promotion, not on my face. I turn my head just enough that his lips land on my cheek. It's a cold, dismissive gesture, and it stops him short. He recoils slightly, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. "What's wrong?" he asks, his good mood dimming almost imperceptibly. Then his eyes land on the bundle in my arms, and the grin returns. "Hey, look at him. He's perfect. He looks just like me. We're going to give him the world, Laura. The absolute world." I just look at him. I look at this stranger in his expensive suit, this man who chose a job title over the birth of his child. I look at him, and I feel nothing. Nothing but a great, empty calm. The woman he left in this room hours ago is gone. She died in his absence. He just doesn't know it yet. He's beautiful, isn't he? I say, my voice steady, betraying none of the storm that has passed, or the one that is about to break. He doesn't notice the chill in my tone. He is too busy admiring what he believes is his creation, his legacy. He has no idea what's coming. He has no idea that he didn't just walk back into a hospital room. He walked into the rest of his life. The silence in the room was a universe. It expanded to fill the space Mark's blustering ego had occupied, leaving behind only the soft, rhythmic puff of the baby's breath and the rustle of the cellophane on the discarded carnations. Mr. Harrison, Arthur, cradled the child with an unpracticed, reverent terror, his large, manicured hands looking clumsy and oversized against the tiny swaddled form. Tears carved clean tracks through the weathered landscape of his face. He wasn't the CEO of Harrison Holdings anymore. He was a grandfather, shipwrecked by grief and rescued by a miracle. "David," he whispered, the name a fragile ghost in the air. "He has David's eyes." He looked up at me, his own eyes pleading, searching for confirmation of a truth he desperately needed to be real. "We don't know yet," I said softly, my voice raspy with exhaustion. "There's still that newborn blue." It was a gentle correction, a small but necessary assertion that this child was his own person, not just a vessel for memory. Arthur nodded, chastened. "Of course. Of course." He rocked the baby, a motion that was more a nervous tremor than a soothing rhythm. "Laura." There are no words. What he did, what I almost did, rewarding him for abandoning you. His jaw tightened, the corporate titan returning for a brief moment. "He won't just be fired. I'll make sure he can't get a job as a janitor in this city." A flicker of the old, satisfying fire of vengeance warmed me, but it died as quickly as it came. It was ashes. The victory felt hollow now, the main event already over. "It doesn't matter anymore, Arthur," I said, and I was surprised to find I meant it. "He's gone." "He is," Arthur affirmed, his gaze softening as it returned to the baby. "And we're here. We are here." He looked around the sterile hospital room, at the plastic water pitcher and the institutional beige walls, as if seeing them for the first time. "This is no place for you. For him. For my grandson." The word still sounded new on his tongue. "I'll make some calls. My house, there's a guest wing. It's private. You'll have staff, a nurse, anything you need. We'll get you out of here tomorrow." It was a command wrapped in a kindness, the casual deployment of wealth and power that was as natural to him as breathing. A week ago, I would have been awed. Now, a different kind of dread, cold and sharp, pricked at me. I had escaped one cage, the one Mark was building for me with his ambition and neglect. I had to be careful I wasn't walking right into another, one gilded with comfort and draped in obligation. "Arthur," I said, my voice gaining a sliver of strength. "His name is Leo." He stopped rocking. He looked from the baby to me, a flicker of confusion, perhaps even hurt, in his eyes. He had already named him David in his heart. "Leo David Harrison," I continued, offering a compromise I hadn't known I was going to make. "After his father. And after my grandfather. He needs his own name, too." Arthur studied my face for a long moment, the shrewd businessman assessing a new, unexpected term in a negotiation. Then, a slow, genuine smile spread across his lips, crinkling the corners of his wet eyes. Leo, he repeated, testing the sound. He looked down at the sleeping infant. Hello, Leo. It's a strong name. Your mother is a very strong woman. In that moment, a fragile truce was struck. He had offered me a world of comfort. I had reminded him it was on my terms. The Harrison estate was less a house and more a small, sovereign nation of limestone and manicured hedges. The guest wing Arthur had mentioned was larger than the entire house I had shared with Mark. It was decorated in muted tones of cream and gray, with abstract art on the walls and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a garden sculpted with geometric precision. It was beautiful, silent, and suffocating. Within 48 hours, my life had been seamlessly and efficiently upgraded. A private nurse, a quiet woman named Elena, materialized to help with Leo. A chef called daily to ask for my preferences. A driver was on call. Arthur had tried to give me the world, just as Mark had promised. The difference was, Arthur could actually deliver it. He was a constant, hovering presence. He'd appear in the morning, his suit immaculate, to hold Leo for 10 minutes before heading to his downtown office. He'd call twice during the day. He'd return in the evening, shedding his corporate armor at the door, and sit for an hour in a plush armchair, just watching his grandson sleep. He spoke endlessly of David. David loved the water, he'd say, watching Leo in his bath. We had a boat. He could sail before he could properly ride a bike. David was brilliant with numbers, he'd muse, as I signed some document a lawyer had brought over, setting up a trust fund for Leo that contained more money than I could fathom. He could have run the company, you know. Better than me, probably. But he was too soft. Too much of his mother in him. I listened, I nodded, I smiled. I learned more about my dead husband in those first 2 weeks than I had in the 5 years I'd known him. David, through his father's memory, was being resurrected as a saint, a prodigy, a perfect son. The man I had loved, the funny, slightly insecure man who loved bad sci-fi movies and could never remember to put the cap back on the toothpaste, was fading. In his place was the Harrison heir, a legend being built to justify the magnitude of his father's grief and the sudden, fierce focus of his love on Leo. The conflict, when it came, was quiet. I walked into the nursery one afternoon to find a decorator discussing wallpaper swatches with Arthur. One was covered in sailboats. The other, in tiny, repeating stock tickers. Arthur, what is this? I asked, keeping my voice even. Just sprucing the place up a bit, Laura, he said, beaming. Making it a proper room for a boy. I thought the sailboats, a nod to David's passion. I like the yellow, I said, pointing to the plain, cheerful color the walls were already painted. And I'd appreciate it if you'd ask me before hiring people to redecorate the nursery. The decorator vanished with the practiced efficiency of someone used to navigating the whims of the wealthy. Arthur's smile faltered. I was only trying to help. I know, I said, picking Leo up from his bassinet. I held him close, a tiny, warm shield. But he is my son. I am his mother. I will decide on the color of his walls. It was a small battle, a skirmish over wallpaper, but it was a battle for sovereignty. Arthur retreated, but the lines had been drawn. He saw Leo as his second chance with David. I saw Leo as his own person, my son, and I would not let him be crushed under the weight of a dead man's legacy, no matter how much Arthur loved them both. The first letter from Mark's lawyer arrived a week later. It was delivered by a courier, a crisp, cream-colored envelope that felt venomous to the touch. It wasn't a direct assault, not yet. It was a request for mediation. It spoke of Mark's deep emotional distress, his profound connection to the child he had believed was his, and his desire to establish a path forward. It was filled with legal jargon that barely masked the pathetic, pleading threat beneath. I showed it to Arthur that evening. He read it, his face turning to granite. He's fishing, he said, his voice a low growl. He thinks he can get a settlement out of us. Thinks we'll pay him to disappear. He crumpled the letter in his fist. I'll have my legal team bury him. No, I said, surprising myself. Not yet. Let's see what he wants. Laura, this is a tactic. He's a snake. I know. But I want to hear it from him. I needed to see him, to understand the shape of the monster I had created. Handing it all over to Arthur's lawyers felt like hiding, like letting another man fight my battles for me. I had started this. I had to see it through. The mediation was held in a sterile conference room in a downtown high-rise. It felt like a parody of the hospital room where it all began. I sat on one side of a ridiculously long mahogany table with my lawyer, a sharp, severe woman named Cynthia, provided by Arthur. Mark sat opposite, looking thinner, diminished. His expensive suit hung on him slightly, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He was trying to project an aura of wounded dignity, but all I saw was desperation. His lawyer, a slick man with 2 white teeth, did all the talking. He spoke of Mark's paternal rights, a phrase he used repeatedly, despite the biological impossibility. He spoke of the psychological trauma of being deceived. He painted a picture of a loving, devoted husband eagerly awaiting the birth of his child, only to have his world shattered by a cruel, calculated lie. I remained silent, my hands clasped in my lap. I let him talk. Then, Mark, against what was clearly his lawyer's advice, decided to speak for himself. Laura, he said, his voice thick with a performance of emotion. I know I made a mistake. I should have been there. I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But everything I did for us. For our family. He looked at me, trying to find the woman he knew, the woman who used to believe his lies. I was there for the whole pregnancy. I felt him kick. I helped you pick out the crib. That bond, that's real. You can't just take that away. He's my son in every way that matters. The sheer audacity of it, the twisting of his neglect into a narrative of loving fatherhood, was breathtaking. What do you want, Mark? I asked, my voice cutting through his performance. His lawyer answered. Mr. Evans is prepared to overlook the Yi deception, in exchange for a structured settlement to compensate for the emotional damages and the loss to his career and reputation. And he wants visitation rights. There it was. The shakedown. Arthur had been right. Cynthia scoffed. Visitation? On what grounds? He has no biological or legal claim to the child. He is, in the eyes of the law, a stranger. A stranger? Mark's voice rose, the mask of civility cracking. I am not a stranger. I put that nursery together. I paid for the damn stroller. I loved him. You loved the idea of him, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. You loved the idea of a son to carry on your name while you were busy building a career. You didn't love him enough to witness his birth. You don't get to claim love now that it's convenient, Mark. You don't get to put a price on it. I stood up. This is over. We have nothing more to say. As we walked out, Mark shouted after me, his voice raw and stripped of all its pretense. You think you've won, Laura? You think you and that old man can just erase me? You have no idea what you've done. You've ruined everything. His words followed me down the hallway, but they held no power. It was the desperate tantrum of a man who had lost. Or so I thought. The official legal filing came 2 weeks later. It was no longer a request, it was a declaration of war. Mark was suing. Not for money this time, but for sole custody of Leo. The petition was a work of fiction, a masterpiece of character assassination. It painted me as mentally unstable, a manipulative hysteric who had entrapped a good man. It claimed my grief over David had driven me mad. It alleged I had concocted the entire scheme to defraud both Mark and Arthur Harrison. It was vile, absurd, and utterly terrifying. It's a nuisance suit, Arthur said, pacing his study, the legal documents spread across his desk like a battle map. It's designed to harass, to intimidate. It will never see the inside of a courtroom. But it will be public, won't it? I asked, my stomach churning. People will see this. Our friends, what's left of them. We will fight it, he said, his voice iron. My resources against his. It's not a fair fight. But Mark had an unnerving confidence. He was no longer just a desperate man, he was a man with a plan. The next phase of his attack wasn't legal, it was personal. He began contacting our old mutual friends, people I had known for years. He didn't rant or rave. He played the victim, weaving a tale of confusion and heartbreak. He'd say things like, "I'm just so worried about Laura. She hasn't been herself since the baby was born. This story about a frozen embryo, it just came out of nowhere. I just want to make sure she and the baby are safe." He planted seeds of doubt, wrapping his venom in the language of concern. The calls from my friends stopped. The supportive texts dwindled. I was being isolated, cast as the villain in my own story. The walls of Arthur's gilded cage began to feel higher, the silence within them more profound. I had my son, I had Arthur's immense resources, but I was becoming an island. The breaking point came during a preliminary hearing for a motion to dismiss Mark's suit. We were in a judge's chambers, a small, wood-paneled room that felt claustrophobic. Mark was there, looking calm, almost smug. His lawyer presented their case, rehashing the lies from the petition. Cynthia, my lawyer, was masterful. She dismantled their arguments with cold, hard facts. The IVF clinic records. David's will, which explicitly mentioned the embryos and his wish for me to use them if I chose. The timeline of Mark's emergency meeting that coincided perfectly with the hours I was in active labor. She was systematically destroying him. I felt a sliver of hope. Arthur, sitting beside me, gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. Then, Mark's lawyer said, "Your Honor, we believe Mrs. Evans's actions were not born of grief, but of a calculated, long-standing deception that went against the final wishes of her deceased husband, Mr. David Harrison." He slid a single piece of paper across the table to the judge. He handed a copy to Cynthia. She read it, and for the first time, her professional composure cracked. Her eyes widened slightly. She passed it to me. It was a printed email. The sender was David Harrison. The recipient was his college roommate. The date was 3 weeks before the car accident that killed him. My blood ran cold as I read the words my husband had written. Asterisk, been thinking a lot about the future, all that stuff. Laura brought up the embryos again. The ones we froze. She's so keen. But lately, I don't know. Is it right? Bringing a kid into the world who will never know their father. Tying her to a ghost for the rest of her life? It feels selfish. Like I'm asking her to put her life on hold for me, forever. Maybe the right thing to do, the loving thing, would be to let it go. To let her go. I think I need to talk to her about it. We need to really talk. The room tilted. That conversation never happened. He died before he could have it. He died, and I was left with only our previous plan, our shared dream. I never knew he had changed his mind. Or that he was starting to. I looked up from the paper, my vision blurring. Mark was staring directly at me. There was no anger on his face. No desperation. Just the cool, triumphant satisfaction of a man who had found the perfect weapon. He had found David's doubt. And he had just handed it to my enemies, to the world, turning my righteous act of love and survival into a final, unforgivable betrayal of the man I claimed to be honoring. Arthur was looking at me, his face a mask of shock and dawning horror, the unspoken question hanging between us, asterisk, did you know? Asterisk, in that moment, I wasn't just fighting Mark anymore. I was fighting the ghost of my husband, too. The silence that fell was a physical thing, a vacuum that sucked the air from my lungs. The flimsy piece of paper in my hand felt impossibly heavy, an anchor dragging me down into a cold, dark place I hadn't known existed. David's words, his familiar, gentle cadence, echoed in my mind, twisted now into a verdict against me. Asterisk, tying her to a ghost for the rest of her life? It feels selfish. My eyes flickered from the paper to Arthur's face. The shock had receded, replaced by a profound, bottomless sorrow. It was the face of a man reliving a nightmare, a man whose brief moment of impossible joy was being poisoned at the source. The question in his eyes had not faded. Asterisk, did you know? Asterisk, it was a shard of ice in my heart. And then there was Mark. He stood by the window, arms crossed, bathed in the sterile hospital light. He wasn't looking at Arthur, he was looking at me. His expression was one of pure, unadulterated victory. It was the look of a chess player who had just announced checkmate, a move so devastating the opponent could only stare at the board in stunned paralysis. He hadn't just fired a weapon, he had crafted it from the purest material he could find, my dead husband's love for me, and aimed it at the very foundation of my new life. My breath hitched. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, once a comfort, now sounded like a ticking clock, counting down the seconds until my world imploded completely. I was losing. I was losing everything. No, I whispered, the word a ragged, desperate sound. I looked directly at Arthur, forcing myself to meet his wounded gaze. No, I didn't know. Mark scoffed, a short, ugly sound of disbelief. Oh, come on, Laura. It's a little convenient, isn't it? The loving widow, so determined to honor her husband's last wish. Except it wasn't his last wish. His last wish was to set you free. But you couldn't let go, could you? Not when there was a genetic golden ticket waiting in a freezer. Every word was a calculated strike, designed to paint me as a manipulative ghoul. I felt my son stir in my arms, his tiny body a warm, solid reality against the spiraling chaos. His presence was a jolt of electricity. I was not just David's widow. I was not Mark's failed wife. I was this child's mother. And a mother fights. My voice, when it came again, was stronger, colder. You're a parasite, Mark. You burrow into people's lives and you feed on what they love, what they hope for. You fed on my grief, pretending to understand. You fed on my hope for this baby, pretending to share it. And now you've gone digging through a dead man's private thoughts, a man you never even knew, looking for something, anything, to use as a weapon. I took a steadying breath, my gaze never leaving Arthur's. Arthur, you knew your son. You knew David. Was he a man of grand, final declarations? Or was he a man who worried? A man who would turn a problem over and over in his head 100 times, considering every angle, especially the ones that would cause him the most pain? Arthur's expression flickered. A hint of recognition. That email, I said, my voice gaining power, fueled by a righteous fury I didn't know I possessed. That isn't a last will and testament. It's a late-night fear. It's the thought of a man who loved me so much, his biggest fear was becoming a burden to me after he was gone. It's a question he was asking his best friend, not a directive he was leaving for me. He was going to talk to me about it. Asterisk, we need to really talk. Asterisk, that's what he wrote. But he never got the chance. He died, Arthur. He died, and I was left with the last conversation we did have. The one where we planned this baby's future. The one where we chose his name. The one where we dreamed of this moment. Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and unrestrained. Do you honestly believe, I choked out, that if I had seen this, if I thought for 1 second that David didn't want this, that I could have done it? This procedure, the injections, the 9 months of sickness and fear and hope, all of it was because it was the only piece of him I had left. It was our dream. And I refused to let it die with him. I finally turned my gaze to Mark, and I let him see all the contempt I felt. You can't understand that, can you, Mark? Because you don't know what it is to love something more than your own ambition. You see a baby and you see a new house. You see a promotion and you see a future. I see my husband's eyes. I see his legacy. I see the best part of a man the world lost too soon. The room was silent again, but this time the silence was different. It was heavy with contemplation. Mark's triumphant smirk had vanished, replaced by a sullen, defensive glare. He had played his card, and it hadn't won him the game. Arthur looked from me to the baby, who had begun to fuss, his tiny mouth opening in a silent cry. Then he looked at the piece of paper Mark had brought in, as if it were a piece of filth. With a slow, deliberate movement, he reached out, took the email from my trembling hand, and folded it neatly in half, then in half again, creasing it with a sharp, final motion. He didn't rip it. He simply nullified it. He set the small, white square down on the bedside table, next to a glass of water, and then looked at Mark. The cold fury that had been in his eyes in the hallway had returned, but now it was magnified, honed to a razor's edge. My son, Arthur said, his voice dangerously quiet, was a good man. A better man than you could ever hope to be. He worried about Laura's happiness above all else. That email, which you so despicably unearthed, is not the proof of betrayal you think it is. It's proof of his love. The kind of selfless love you can't even comprehend. He took a step closer to Mark, who instinctively shrank back. You didn't just abandon my daughter-in-law while she was in labor. That, I've learned, is just the pathetic baseline of your character. You came back here, to this room, where she had just given birth to my grandson, and you attempted to emotionally crucify her. You tried to poison the single most beautiful moment of my life since David died. You tried to use my son's memory as a crowbar to pry your way back into a life you don't deserve. Mr. Harrison. Arthur. Mark stammered, his face pale, his bravado utterly shattered. I was just trying to show you the truth. I thought you should know who you were dealing with. Oh, I know exactly who I'm dealing with, Arthur snarled, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. I'm dealing with a coward. A hollow man so terrified of his own insignificance that he has to tear down everyone around him. The promotion is gone. Your job is gone. That is a given. But I want you to understand this very clearly. He leaned in, his voice resonating with all the power and influence he commanded. If you ever come near Laura again, if you ever come near my grandson, if I so much as hear your name mentioned in the same city as them, I will make it my personal and unending mission to dismantle your life, piece by piece. Every door will be closed to you. Every bridge will be burned. You will have nothing. You are nothing. Now get out of my sight. Mark stared, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He looked at me one last time, a desperate, pleading look that I met with a wall of stone. There was nothing left for him here. Defeated, broken, and utterly erased, he turned and stumbled out of the room, the door clicking shut behind him, sealing off the last 3 years of my life like a tomb. The silence that returned was a balm. The tension bled out of the room, leaving only the soft beeping of the monitor and the gentle snuffing sounds of my son. Arthur stood for a long moment, his back to me, his shoulders shaking. When he finally turned, his face was wet with tears, but his eyes were clear. Laura, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I am so sorry. For even a second of doubt. I'm so sorry. You didn't know, I whispered, rocking my son gently. He found the one thing that could make you doubt. He found the one thing that made David, Arthur corrected, a sad smile touching his lips. His beautiful, overthinking, loving heart. He looked at the baby in my arms, and the love that poured from him was overwhelming. What's his name? I looked down at the perfect, tiny face, at the miniature fingers curled into a fist, at the faint, star-shaped mark on his wrist, a perfect echo of his father's. I had planned to name him David. It had felt like the only choice. But looking at him now, a new person forged from old love, it didn't feel right. He wasn't a replacement. He was a continuation. A new chapter. His name is Leo, I said, the name feeling right on my tongue for the first time. Leo David Evans. Arthur nodded, his eyes shining. Leo, he repeated softly. A lion. He's perfect. He hesitated, his hands clasped in front of him. Laura, you and Leo, you are my family now. My only family. You will never have to worry about anything. A house, security, anything you need. It's yours. We will sort out the legalities with him. It will be clean. You will be free. I nodded, a wave of relief so profound it almost buckled me. Thank you, Arthur. No, he said, shaking his head. Thank you. You brought my son back to me. He looked at Leo, his expression one of pure, unadulterated grandfatherly adoration. May I? I smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. Of course, Grandpa. As I carefully passed my son into his grandfather's waiting arms, a sense of peace settled over me. The ghost I had been fighting was finally at rest. David's doubt wasn't a betrayal, it was his final, clumsy, beautiful act of love, a willingness to sacrifice his own legacy for my happiness. And in a way, I had honored it. I had let go of the woman I was with him, the grieving widow defined by her loss. I had fought my way through the darkness and emerged as someone new. 3 months later, the afternoon sun streamed through the large bay window of our new living room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It was a quiet house, filled not with the ghosts of the past, but with the clutter of a new life, a baby swing in the corner, a half-finished bottle on the coffee table, a colorful playmat covered in soft toys. I sat on the floor, watching Leo as he lay on his back, his chubby legs kicking at a plush giraffe dangling above him. He gurgled, a happy, bubbling sound that had become the soundtrack to my world. He had David's eyes, a deep, thoughtful brown, but he had my smile. The front door opened and Arthur came in, shrugging off his suit jacket and tossing it unceremoniously over a chair. He was no longer Mr. Harrison, the formidable CEO. He was Grandpa, a role he had embraced with a surprising, joyful clumsiness. The lion is roaring, I see, he said, his face breaking into a wide grin as he knelt on the floor beside me. He's been practicing all day, I laughed. I think he's demanding a hostile takeover of the Rattle Company. Arthur chuckled, reaching out a finger for Leo to grip with surprising strength. He's got the Harrison business gene, all right. He looked at me, his expression soft. How are you, Laura? Really? I followed his gaze, watching my son's tiny hand wrapped around his grandfather's finger. The star-shaped birthmark on his wrist was a small, perfect constellation. It wasn't a brand of the past anymore. It was a map, a connection between a father in heaven, a son on earth, and a family reborn from the ashes of grief. I'm tired, I admitted honestly. I'm covered in spit up. I haven't had a coherent thought in weeks. I looked up and met Arthur's eyes, and my smile was genuine. And I've never been happier in my entire life. I had lost a husband. I had been betrayed by another. But in the end, I hadn't been left with a ghost. I had been left with a gift. And as I watched my son smile up at his grandfather, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that we were not a broken family. We were a new one, forged in loss, bound by love, and just getting started.